more than 7 decades after their creation. Thousands upon thousands of government recordings, audio tapes, reels of film, video cassettes, and eventually digital files remain locked away in secure facilities, their contents known only to a select few, shielded from public scrutiny. Entire decades of American history, pivotal moments of global confrontation, and the intimate details of decision-making processes are captured within these silent archives, yet remain inaccessible. What secrets, so potent and enduring, could compel the world's most powerful democracy to maintain such a vast, impenetrable vault of hidden information, long after the architects of those secrets have passed from the stage? The answer lies in a complex interplay of national security, institutional inertia, and the profound, often conflicting, interpretations of historical truth. The mid-20th century witnessed the dawn of an unprecedented era of state secrecy, driven by the escalating tensions of the Cold War. As the Soviet Union rose as a nuclear-armed adversary, the United States responded by rapidly expanding its intelligence apparatus, giving birth to agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency in 1947 and the National Security Agency in 1952. This was not merely an expansion of personnel and resources. It was a fundamental shift in how the government perceived and managed information. Secrecy, once a tool for specific military operations, became an overarching doctrine, a primary weapon in a global ideological struggle where information itself was a battlefield. Every piece of intelligence, every strategy, every diplomatic overture was potentially a double-edged sword, capable of fortifying national defense or, if compromised, triggering catastrophic consequences. The very fabric of democratic openness, a cornerstone of American identity, began to fray under the relentless pressure of a hidden war fought in shadows and whispers. Within this climate, the practice of classification blossomed into a highly formalized, multi-tiered system. Documents, photographs, and critically, audio recordings of sensitive conversations, from Oval Office deliberations to field agent debriefings, were meticulously labeled. The initial designation, often confidential, indicated information whose unauthorized disclosure could reasonably be expected to cause damage to national security. Secret implied serious damage, while top secret was reserved for information that, if revealed, could reasonably be expected to cause exceptionally grave damage. Beyond these, a labyrinth of compartmented information existed, often marked with code words like special intelligence or sensitive compartmented information (SIE), restricting access to an even narrower circle of individuals with specific need to know. A classification officer, often a mid-level bureaucrat tasked with the immense responsibility of safeguarding national interests, would make these determinations guided by executive orders and agency directives that were themselves often classified. The decisions were made under pressure, with an understanding that a mistake could have profound, even lethal repercussions for agents in the field or for the nation's strategic posture. Imagine, if you will, a small, windowless room in the Pentagon in the early 1960s. The air is thick with the scent of stale cigarette smoke and ozone from the humming machines. A man named Arthur Vance, dressed in a crisp but slightly rumpled gray suit, meticulously threads a reel of magnetic tape onto a bulky Ampex recorder. He wears thin-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, his brow furrowed in concentration. The tape contains a recording of a highly sensitive discussion between President Kennedy and his advisors regarding a covert operation in a volatile region. Every word, every hesitation, every strategic calculation is etched onto that ferric oxide strip. As the playback begins, the hushed voices fill the small space. Arthur listens intently, his finger poised over a thick red stamp. His directive is clear: categorize any information that could compromise the mission, endanger personnel, or reveal intelligence collection methods. He hears a casual remark about a specific type of aircraft, an offhand mention of a foreign contact, a particular cadence in the president's voice that might, to a trained ear, hint at a broader geopolitical strategy. Each potential vulnerability sends a prickle of anxiety down his spine. He knows that across the globe, adversaries are equally engaged in their own game of intelligence and counterintelligence. With a heavy sigh, Arthur carefully removes the tape and affixes a label. Top secret. Handled via SCI channels only. Permanent classification. The stamp comes down with a decisive thud, a tiny sound with enormous lasting consequence. The immediate consequence of such classifications was the creation of an immense, largely invisible information barrier. Information flowed upward but rarely outward. It established a shadow government where critical decisions were made and events unfolded without the knowledge, or often even the consent, of the broader public, or sometimes even elected officials not privy to the innermost circles. This system granted immense power to a select few, enabling them to shape policy, deploy resources, and even conduct covert operations based on intelligence that remained entirely opaque to the very citizens they served. It bred a culture of suspicion, both externally towards perceived enemies and internally among different government agencies, each safeguarding its own secrets. The erosion of trust was palpable. Citizens began to question official narratives, fueled by leaks, rumors, and the undeniable sense that significant events were unfolding behind an impenetrable veil. For historians, journalists, and the public, these sealed records became tantalizing voids, blank pages in the national narrative, fostering a landscape ripe for speculation and sometimes genuine concern about accountability. The philosophical justifications for such sweeping secrecy were themselves a subject of intense, though often quiet, debate within government circles. One dominant school of thought maintained that absolute secrecy was a non-negotiable imperative for national survival. In a world bristling with nuclear weapons and ideological rivals, any crack in the information fortress could be exploited, leading to strategic disadvantage, loss of life, or even global conflict. This perspective emphasized the need to protect sources and methods, the individuals who risked their lives to gather intelligence, and the ingenious, often clandestine technologies and techniques used to acquire it. Revealing these, even decades later, could compromise ongoing operations or expose future capabilities to adversaries. Another, more cautious perspective argued that while initial secrecy was often necessary, the long-term, indefinite classification of vast swaths of historical material was detrimental to democratic governance. Proponents of this view suggested that overclassification became a default, a bureaucratic reflex to avoid scrutiny, protect reputations, or simply to reduce the immense labor of review. They posited that historical transparency was vital for learning from past mistakes, ensuring governmental accountability, and fostering informed public discourse, without which a democracy could not truly thrive. The tension between these two poles, national security versus the public's right to know, became the enduring crucible of America's relationship with its own classified past. So if the initial urgent reasons for classifying a document or recording fade with the passage of time, when the Cold War ends, when the agents mentioned have retired or passed away, when the technology itself becomes obsolete, what then justifies the continued sealing of these historical echoes? What intricate, often self-perpetuating mechanisms ensure that the silence of these black vaults persists, generation after generation, defying the very spirit of historical inquiry and democratic transparency? The answers are woven into the very fabric of bureaucratic process, legal interpretation, and the enduring human impulses to protect reputation and maintain control. The reasons for continued secrecy, long after the immediate threat has passed, are multifaceted and deeply entrenched in the bureaucratic machinery of government. One primary justification remains the protection of sources and methods. Even if a specific operation from the 1950s is now irrelevant, revealing the techniques used to gather intelligence, the specific types of surveillance equipment, or the names of foreign assets could still provide valuable insights to modern adversaries. Knowledge of past methodologies might allow hostile intelligence services to anticipate current or future operations, or to identify individuals whose families could still be at risk. This argument holds significant weight, particularly for intelligence agencies whose very existence relies on their ability to operate clandestinely. Moreover, the privacy interests of individuals mentioned in the records, whether they were intelligence agents, foreign contacts, or simply innocent bystanders caught in the web of an investigation, are often cited. Releasing their names or personal details, even after many decades, could cause embarrassment, compromise remaining family members, or violate ethical commitments made at the time. Beyond these tangible concerns, there is the powerful, almost gravitational pull of institutional inertia. Declassification is not a simple flipping of a switch. It is a labor-intensive, often agonizingly slow process. Each classified document or recording, especially those designated top secret or SCI, must undergo a painstaking line-by-line, word-by-word review by trained declassification specialists. These specialists must evaluate the information against current national security guidelines, identify potential risks, and consult with original classifying agencies or successor organizations. The sheer volume of material awaiting review is staggering, estimated by some researchers to be in the billions of pages and thousands of hours of audio and video. Agencies are often understaffed and underfunded for this task, leading to massive backlogs and indefinite delays. In this environment, indefinite sealing becomes the default, a path of least resistance for agencies struggling with limited resources and competing priorities. The legal framework governing access to government information, primarily the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, enacted in 1966, was designed to provide a pathway for public access. Yet it contains robust exemptions that agencies frequently invoke to justify continued secrecy. Exemption 1, for instance, specifically protects information properly classified in the interest of national defense or foreign policy. Exemption 3 protects information specifically exempted from disclosure by statute. Exemption 6 protects information that would constitute a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. Agencies, when faced with FOIA requests for ancient tapes or documents, often cite these exemptions broadly, leading to heavily redacted releases, documents with entire paragraphs or even pages blacked out, or outright denials. The burden then falls on the requester to challenge these decisions through lengthy and expensive administrative appeals or costly litigation, a process that can stretch for years, often ending in compromise or continued obfuscation. Consider the experience of a dedicated researcher, Eleanor Vance, in the early 21st century. She sits in a brightly lit but sparsely furnished reading room at the National Archives, surrounded by others poring over declassified papers. Eleanor has spent 5 years trying to access a specific set of audio recordings from the Nixon White House era, tapes she believes hold critical clues to a lesser-known foreign policy decision. Her initial FOIA request was met with a generic denial citing national security and protection of sources and methods. She appealed, provided specific arguments, and waited. Months turned into years. Finally, a partial release arrived, a digitized copy of some documents referenced in the tapes, but the recordings themselves remained sealed. The documents were a checkerboard of black ink, whole sentences and names obliterated. Eleanor squints at a line. Discussed with Redacted the implications of redacted on stability in Redacted. Her frustration is a palpable weight. She knows the historical record is incomplete, that a vital piece of the puzzle lies just beyond her reach, trapped in magnetic tape that hums silently in some distant temperature-controlled vault. The bureaucratic walls are not physical barriers of concrete and steel, but endless layers of review, justification, and legal precedent, designed to withstand the most determined assault. The long-term impact of this sustained secrecy on society is profound. It fosters an environment where historical understanding is perpetually incomplete, forcing historians to rely on circumstantial evidence, memoirs, and speculation rather than primary sources. This can lead to the proliferation of alternative narratives and, in some cases, conspiracy theories, as gaps in official accounts are filled by imaginative, often unfounded, conjectures. The inability to fully examine past governmental decisions impedes society's ability to learn from its mistakes and to hold power accountable. It creates a disconnect between the public and its government, undermining trust and fueling cynicism. The very narrative of the nation, its triumphs and its failures, becomes fragmented, with significant portions relegated to the realm of perpetual mystery. The cost of maintaining these black vaults is not just financial, it is a cost to intellectual honesty, to democratic health, and to the collective memory of a people. Within this landscape, differing interpretations of what truly justifies continued secrecy persist. One perspective, often articulated by intelligence officials, argues that the sources and methods argument is not a mere convenience, but a fundamental pillar of national security that transcends the immediate context of a particular operation. They maintain that enemies possess long memories and sophisticated analytical capabilities, and even seemingly innocuous details from decades past can be pieced together to compromise current or future intelligence gathering. This view suggests that the default position must be one of caution and continued protection, prioritizing the safety of intelligence personnel and the effectiveness of operations over immediate historical gratification. A counter-argument, frequently voiced by historians, journalists, and transparency advocates, posits that this argument is often overused and, at times, serves as a shield for bureaucratic embarrassment or the protection of reputations. They contend that much of what remains sealed would, upon review, prove harmless to current national security, but might reveal past policy failures, ethical lapses, or inconvenient truths about powerful individuals and institutions. They argue that the vast majority of classified information could be released with appropriate redactions, allowing for greater transparency without undue risk. A third, more pragmatic view suggests that the problem is less about malice or intent, and more about the overwhelming scale of the task and the prohibitive costs associated with comprehensive declassification. The sheer volume of material, combined with the meticulous, time-consuming nature of the review process, creates a logistical bottleneck that makes full transparency an almost unattainable ideal. So as the silent reels and digital files continue to accumulate, guarding their whispered histories for decades, perhaps even centuries, what ultimate truths remain buried in these sealed recordings? What profound lessons about power, morality, and the human condition are awaiting discovery? And what concerted, perhaps unprecedented effort will it ultimately take for the silent stories of these black vaults to finally echo through the public square, shaping a more complete and honest understanding of who we were, and thus who we are yet to become?